You're listening to episode 180 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the official podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association, a grassroots-driven effort to answer the needs of secular teaching and practice for contemporary society. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the SBA website has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Sarah Barker, Amy Boyle, and Ian Dodd join us to speak about bringing a secular Sunday assembly to the City of Angels. Why do we congregate? Why is it we seem to have this human interest to come together in groups? It's more than just loneliness, of course. There's an affirmation of belonging, of identity, and perhaps even some kind of personal encouragement for us in these basic communal activities. Communities can take many forms. And one thing traditional models have is a lot of practice providing that kind of support. But how about us secularists? And how can we provide the kind of structure which not only respects our unbelief, but takes it a few steps further and fosters the development of pro-social bridge building and sharing of our common human experience? The Sunday Assembly might be one way to accomplish just that. Sarah Barker has always believed that the truth makes for much more enticing storytelling than fiction. Sarah is the creator of You Are Here TV, a documentary web series that explores the rich, varied, and rapidly growing secular community in Los Angeles. Sarah holds an MFA in film production from Chapman University's prestigious Dodd College of Film and Television, and worked in the television industry for both Technicolor and HBO for many years as an ADR and dialogue editor. She is also a freelance filmmaker, documentarian, and producer, writer, editor with WriteAfterThis.com, broadcast productions, and creative. Sarah is currently in post-production with 2 more episodes of You Are Here TV and a feature documentary, Atheist Camp, currently in pre-production. Sarah has taught radio, television, and film production for over 10 years and served as the head of the Media Communications Department with Genesee Community College in Western New York. Currently, Sarah is television and radio production faculty with Pasadena City College in Pasadena, California. Amy Boyle is a writer, skeptic, and community organizer who dabbles in politics. She recently worked as a local field director in the 2012 presidential campaign and is interested in promoting lasting grassroots communities for the common good. Ian Dodd was raised as an atheist and secular humanist in a small, religiously conservative town. As a young adult, he went searching for that ineffable something more and explored a variety of New Age practices. Along the way, he read the Tao of Physics and discovered he was more enchanted by the physics than the Tao part, and thus was born his love of science. Another discovery was Buddhism, with his emphasis on experience, compassion, and healthy skepticism, and thus he began not as consistent as he would like practice over the past decade. For the past several years, he has been an active member of his local Unitarian church, where he co-founded a free thought group for non-theists within the church and is now involved in launching the Sunday Assembly Los Angeles, the next grand experiment in creating secular Sangha. So sit back, relax, and have a nice California dream. Our guests today are Sarah Barker. Sarah, nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you.
Amy Boyle. Amy, glad to meet you.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
and my friend and occasional visitor to the wilds of Minnesota, Ian Dodd. Ian, nice to hear your voice again.
And good to hear you, Ted. Looking forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
So, Ian, why don't you get us started? Tell us the story about the Sunday Assembly.
Okay. Well, the Sunday Assembly first came to my awareness earlier this year. They first started popping up a lot of online news services and blogs and things like that. And I was paying attention to them because I co-founded and organized a free thought group affiliated with a small Unitarian church here in Los Angeles. And it seemed like an interesting growth of secular community, and it was particularly interesting because of the phenomenal growth that they had had. Their first meeting, they hoped to have 35 or 40 people. 250 showed up. The next month they had 350, and soon enough they had to find a new space because they'd outgrown their first one, and they now have 600 people who show up at their monthly meetings. And I just found this really intriguing. And I was curious about what was the root of their successful growth. Well, as I followed the story, there was a notice that Sanderson Jones, who's one of the co-founders, was going to be making a tour of the United States and bopping around to different cities and talking to people who were interested to find out more about it. So I sent an email saying, "Hey, when you're in Los Angeles, let's get together." When I didn't hear back, I didn't really think much about it until one Wednesday in June, and I get this email that says, "Okay, what's good for you, Friday or Saturday?" So I quickly scrambled and said, well, let me invite some people who want to hear your story. So I put out an email blast to a bunch of friends of mine around town who were affiliated with a variety of secular groups. Atheist United, American Humanist Association, the Harvard Humanist Community Project, my own group at the Unitarian Church, so on and so forth. And we all agreed to meet at, ironically, a British pub in Hollywood, or at least Tinseltown's version of a pub. And so about 4 or 5 of us met there on a Saturday afternoon, and we had a couple of pints, and Sanderson basically told us about the Sunday Assembly, how it came to be, the brainchild of himself and Pippa Evans, who's another stand-up comedian. And he's funny and infectious and energetic and charismatic, and by the end of our second beer, we're all laughing uproariously, and he's looking around the table going, "So, when are you guys going to launch Sunday Assembly Los Angeles?" And we all kind of looked at each other and said, "I guess, yeah, so how do we do this?" And by midnight that night, there was a Google group that had been established, and we've been kind of going gangbusters since then.
Wonderful. And Ian, I want to digress from our main topic this moment to just talk for a second about that free thought group that you started in your church. How's that going?
It's on some levels it's going phenomenally well, and on some levels it's kind of frustrating, which has kind of led me to my involvement in Sunday Assembly. So the Unitarian Church in Santa Monica, California has traditionally had a very strong humanistic and non-theistic contingent. I actually sat on the hiring committee for the minister a couple of years ago when we were looking for a new one, and we took a survey that showed about half the membership identified as some variety of non-believer: religious humanist, secular humanist, atheist, spiritual but not religious, whatever you want to call them. But there was no formal structure for them. And so a couple of years ago, I was approached by some of the older members of the church who wanted to start a discussion group. And it started out as just 4 or 5 of us sitting around having coffee after the regular services. And in the subsequent time, in the last couple of years, it has grown to a membership of about 80 people, which represents about 20% of the entire church membership. We've put on a variety of public events, speakers, and we've done socializing with other secular groups around Los Angeles. We've done a little bit of service work. So that part's been great. The part that I have found frustrating is that it seems like it's hit a bit of a plateau. Like it's a very safe place within the church for a lot of people. That's where they go to be in community, and it's where they go to be secular. And they love to sit around at our monthly meetings and agree with each other about how much they don't believe in God. But it never felt like it was going beyond that. And so, to be real honest, that's part of my inspiration for Sunday Assembly. When I saw what was happening in London, that got me very excited. And so then I saw it as kind of an opportunity to sort of launch the same group again, but on a bigger scale. And so that's kind of how I got sucked into this project.
And it sounds like you were looking for a gap that some folks have in various communities that are not faith-based, shall we say, that the negative proposition only carries you so far, and you're looking for something that's perhaps a bit more positively engaged with what we do in our daily lives.
Right. I saw it as an opportunity to how do we practice what we preach, if you'll excuse the phrase. How do we take our humanistic values? How do we take our compassion? How do we take our desire to leave the world a better place than the one we came into? How do we make a mark, in the here and now rather than hoping for the hereafter?
Well, thanks for that background, and I'm wondering if, Amy, if you would be willing to tell the listeners a little bit more about the Sunday Assembly itself and what that is.
Sure. So originally, of course, Sunday Assembly was in London, and as I understand it, Sanderson and Pippa, who are both comedians, started an informal group, and in just a few months, like Ian said, it became something much larger than they anticipated, like 600 people. But what they built was, it seems rather agendaless, which I think is why it's been so infectious. It's really people just coming together for good music and foot-stomping fun. Their motto is live better, help often, and wonder more, which is pretty beautiful and brings people together. They have guest speakers. The assembly is positive, and the tone is enthusiastic and positive, and I think they've just found that that's something that everyone needs, whether they believe in a God or they don't. We all need people, and we need positivity, and they've just built something great that way.
Terrific. And I also want to ask what the value each of you sees in having that kind of, for want of a better phrase, congregational celebration. Amy, why don't you keep talking and tell us, what do you see as the value of that?
I like this question. I lost religion all by myself. I didn't know there were any atheists. I didn't know any. So I spent, over the last years, I've gone to a lot of conferences. I was sort of mesmerized by this idea that there were other people who were secular humanists who wanted to do good, but not necessarily, inside the walls of a church. And so in talking to people all over the U.S. and in other countries who were, humanists or atheists or skeptics or whatever name that they called themselves, it seemed to me that there was a need, that there were a lot of people who were looking for something they couldn't always articulate, like some way to come together. And I would talk to my friends who often happened to be atheists at this point in my life and tell them about all these great groups and all these things that people are doing and, these websites that I would follow and these great things that we could do together. And I'd ask them if they wanted to come, and they'd say, why? And so that was this big question mark. And ultimately, I think that people need to come together for something positive. You can't get together to not believe in something. But I think humanists have a lot that's positive to offer and a lot to wonder about. I recently worked on the presidential campaign and just started grassroots organizing and was just floored by how much people could do when they got together and how energized they were when they found each other. Like we were, getting thousands of volunteers together to phone bank for Obama, which is, it's not always a pleasant task, but everyone was happy to do it because we built a community that was satisfying, a really strong need. So So I know I'm rambling, but I do think that there's great power in community. I think it satisfies a lot of needs, and I think that that's something that church, to be frank, does very well.
Yeah.
And when I look around at like my secular friends and my secular community, there are some very specific needs and some more general ones that I think community can fill. I think that we have grief when we lose people, and we need people to rely on who don't maybe offer us the same sorts of pleasantries that someone who believes that there's a life after this one will. I got married recently, and we had a really difficult time finding a celebrant that would celebrate our union in the way that it was important to us. I know parents who are raising their children in, with secular values and humanistic values, and it's nice to have support from a community for all of those specific needs, that are humanistic but not religious. So that, in addition to, of course, just fellowship. Like, fellowship is an important thing, and it's not it's not religious. It's a human need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that these celebrations of milestones in lives is a community thing while still needing that personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a very good point. Sarah, how about for you? What do you see as the value in having this kind of congregation of people?
Well, I really have to echo a lot of what I just heard. It's funny because my background, I've been studying Buddhism for about 11 years, and I'm a secular Buddhist, and I belong to a really cool organization in LA. That's it's a Buddhist organization where I feel like I can approach Buddhism from a secular perspective. And one of the things that I value about that community is sangha, which is which is fellowship and community. And I think that that's for fear of echoing what I just heard, I think that humans need humans. We need to interact with each other. We need each other. And also, I think, and this is one of the things that I'm excited about with Sunday Assembly, is that hopefully, at least speaking for myself, my hope is that the people that find their way to Sunday Assembly they come from everywhere. Some might be really hardline atheists, really hardline. And then I would imagine, hopefully, we're also bringing in a lot of people who are just skeptical or who are open or have questions or questioning. Yeah. And I find for a lot of those people, for fear of using a word that could be off-putting to a secularist, I believe that there is a desire for some kind of spiritual connection. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Maybe spiritual isn't the right word, but these are bigger questions that we ask ourselves. What is the meaning of my life? What is the meaning of my life in relationship to other humans? And these, I think, transcend a God concept, and I think that nobody is immune from experiencing and asking themselves these questions. And so I think that having an organization like this helps to answer those questions, or maybe not to answer, but just to make meaning. I think that we need to tell each other stories. We need to share stories and share them together as a collective. We've been doing it since we've been walking on 2 feet. It is the legacy of the human species, and I think that it's one of the reasons why the model of the church is so effective. I think is a long legacy of storytelling. And I would like to see that, the secular movement can start its own legacy of storytelling, and to get away from this idea of, quote unquote God bashing, or, let's all get together and gripe about what we don't believe in, but instead to come together and talk about what we have in common. Because I think that, a lot of, and so that's the other thing, is there's a lot of ideas out there around what it means to be secular, and they're not particularly savory. We're immoral, we don't, we have no ethics because we don't have the reward of a heaven concept to look forward to, so therefore we have nothing to motivate us to do good. And I think that the more that we can kind of rally around and create these organizations that are founded in good works, being of service, which I think is another thing that I'm hoping will come out of this organization, in addition to fellowship, is to kind of just obliterate those myths around what it means to be secular, because it's not, there's just a lot of re-educating to do, and I think that organizations like this are going to help to re-educate in a really positive way.
Yeah. Sarah, a phrase you used, make meaning, struck a chord in a couple of ways. One is that it's something we make ourselves. It's not something we have to rely on externally. It's something we choose to create every moment. And that's what I see as one of the foundational differences with a secular humanist or a secular Buddhist outlook, is that it's in our hands. to do this rather than relying on an external source. And we don't have to be jerks about that. We can celebrate our shared humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ian, how about you? What is the value that you see in having this kind of grouping and celebration?
Well, without trying to repeat what my partners have already put out there, I think there's a part of the secular community that is hesitant to come out because of this reputation that the very forward atheists have kind of put forward in the last few years. I mean, obviously we're referring to the Four Horsemen and the very public aspect that atheism has enjoyed recently. But I think there's a lot of people who want to congregate and want to find like-minded people, but they don't want to be branded as the Christian bashers or anything like that. And so I wish I could remember the exact place or source that I saw this, but there was an interesting sociological study done recently in which they asked churchgoers, why do they go to church and why do they think that their fellow congregants go to church? And interestingly enough, most people said, well, I come to church for community and fellowship and shared values. All the other people here in my church come for religious reasons. They need the theology. But I'm just here for my friends.
Yeah, I think that they were afraid to die. I think that was the biggest reason given.
And so in a sense, that's what we're trying to create. We're trying to create a place where like-minded people can come together and find fellowship and find shared values and celebrate life, and to kind of go back to the Sunday Assembly's basic motto of live better, help often, and wonder more. There are just some amazing stories out there to be told. From a scientific standpoint, I mean, I look at the story of the creation and evolution of the universe over the last 14 billion years, and not only is it an amazing story in and of itself, but the fact that we as human beings have stumbled upon the story and developed the story and gone out and tested the story and have evidence for the story, and now, less than 100 years after the first person came up with the story, we have pretty compelling evidence that we can be confident that the story's, at least in large part, true. And to me, that is more fascinating than any other origin story that any other culture has ever come up with, be it Genesis or choose your creation myth. It is our creation myth. It's our modern creation story of the 21st century, and I think it's a testament not only to the story itself, but a testament to the people who were inventive and imaginative enough and creative enough to go out and figure out how to find out whether it was true or not.
Yeah, the natural world is endlessly fascinating. So let's go through and ask each of you how this is different from other secular groups you're involved with. As I recall, Ian, you were saying that you sent a note to several different people in different groups. So Ian, let's start with you. How is this different from the groups you're involved with today?
Sure. Well, take a look at the grouping of people who showed up to have a beer with Sanderson back in June. We had representatives of My Unitarian Church, of Atheists United, of the Harvard Humanist Community Project, of the Secular Student Alliance, and they all have a different focus, whether it be politically motivated, whether it be catering to college students. The group in My Unitarian Church, it seems to be kind of an outgrowth of sort of a long Unitarian history, which we don't need to get into here, other than to summarize it in the standard Unitarian joke, which is that a Unitarian is just an atheist who gets lonely on Sundays. Again, it kind of goes back to that whole point about fellowship, but I think the opportunity for the Sunday Assembly is the opportunity to create this fellowship and to really shift the focus onto this, celebration of life, and just find wonder in the natural world. And it's also to me it's an opportunity to reach out across some generational lines. The groups that I've tended to be involved with, and I'm one of them myself, so I can say this, it's full of a lot of old, white, gray-haired guys. Okay? And and I'm looking at my kids, who you've met, who, one in college and one in high school, and, they've been non-believers since the day they were born, and they're not interested in, like, continually arguing for the non-existence of a deity. That's passé. They want to get together with their friends, and they want to hang out, and they want to have great music, and they want to have fun, and they want to do like a big puppy pile sleepover. And so in a sense, what we're trying to do is create a space where us old white gray-haired guys can hang out with our kids and celebrate all that stuff together.
Amy, how about you? How do you see this as being different from other secular groups you're involved with?
I think Ian made some great points. But for me, I've been a dilettante of some of the national groups, so this is local for me. So that's different. But also in all of the circles, I guess, that I've played in, the feminist circle and the skeptical circle and the atheist circle, there seems to be some energy, understandably so, in defining exactly what it means to be a part of that group, or to have that be your priority. Sunday Assembly, to me, is at its heart inclusive. I think that we hope to accentuate what we have in common, rather than accentuate our differences, so that we can establish that community and see what we can build together, instead of building walls.
Yeah, bridges instead of walls.
Bridges instead of walls.
Yeah. And Sarah, how about you? How is this different from other groups that you're involved with?
I have to be honest. It's been really exciting for me, because I actually met Ian through a project that I'm working on, and through Ian, really, who's been kind of opening his world up to me, I'm just now starting to get really active and involved in local secular organizations. So I'm fairly uneducated in terms of how it all works in LA. I mean, speaking from, as I mentioned, I'm pretty active in my Buddhist practice, but where I practice, although there is this underpinning of kind of the secular nature of Buddhism, there are a lot of people that attend my sangha who are religious, and are grappling with holding on to their God concept while trying to understand the Dharma. And so I never really feel like I can be really open and vocal about my atheism. And when I do talk about it, it always feels, I could be, this could be just my own perception of it, but I sometimes feel like a little bit of a pariah, that should not be said, kind of thing. Much like Amy said earlier, I think to me, for fear of sounding narcissistic, but I often wonder if there are a lot of people out there like me who are feeling a little bit lonely in their secular principle and looking for a place to just, it takes a lot of courage to come out and say I'm secular, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, in a country wherein, well, I don't want to go down that road, but at any rate, that's a whole other podcast, right?
We're about.
Keep it on target.
Unshaking and perfect separation of church and state.
That's
what do
right.
you mean? Come on.
Right. Yeah. So I think really what I see Sunday Assembly working to do is to create a safe place to dance, to sing, to have fun, to play games. We're working on this video right now, and we asked them to send us some footage of some of the stuff they shot for the initial 40 Dates and 40 Nights, the first Sunday Assembly, rather, in England. And they sent this footage, and
looks like a great party.
Oh, I was going through just, a lot of it, probably hours of it, and I'm looking at all this footage, and man, you would never guess, and I think that's the beauty of Sunday Assembly. It's not about being an atheist, it's not about being a Christian, it really felt like it was just this big, fun party. And the other thing I noticed, and this speaks to what Ian said, is a lot of young people. One of the things that I see as a woman who's just kind of started getting active in my community, and also because I do a documentary, I've been going to a lot of organizations and interviewing a lot of people because I have a secular documentary, and I find that there's not a lot of women, and there's not a lot of young people, and I see this real hole demographically that I think needs to be reached out to. And Ian and I talk about this. We've talked about this. This fact, I guess, that's been released in various publications that secularism in the United States among the millennials has grown 10% in the last 15%, 10 to 15%, I think, in the last decade.
Yeah.
Among the millennial population, this is clearly an audience segment for. Oh, listen to me. Okay, let's not use that word. A demographic segment that there's an interest there, and it's an outcropping of a lot of different things that I'm sure you talk about on other podcasts. But I think that this is a segment that needs to be reached, and I think that this community, this Sunday assembly, will bring it all together, will bring everyone together, and will hopefully kind of break through the segmentation that I'm seeing in my short, brief time with exploring, local secular organizations in LA.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And it's interesting that we notice this demographic, Ian, that you mentioned in our Buddhist communities. I'm not seeing a lot of people of color, and I know that's changing, and I'm glad to see that, and I try to dedicate a few episodes to that every so often to keep a spotlight on it, to make sure it doesn't get lost. And we see that in particular in California. I'm very happy about that. But we're also seeing some challenges with our age demographic, that we're not as widely representative of our local physical communities as perhaps we should be. I did want to have one follow-up question for you, Sarah, is how long have you thought of yourself as a secular Buddhist? Because I don't hear people say that quite as openly very often.
Well, I feel like I'm qualified to say it with authority. No, but in all honesty, I studied Tibetan Buddhism for 7 years, and as I'm sure you know, it's there's a lot of religiosity to the Tibetan approach of Buddhism, which is nothing wrong with that by any means, and I found great value in that practice for me, great value. But again, what I find fascinating about Buddhism is the teachings of Gautama, Siddhartha, and really, he would often say in his sutras, I don't talk about things pertaining to God. That's not really what this is about. This is about
Right.
practice. This is about being mindful in every moment. What does God have to do with that? And that's really not obviously verbatim what he said, but that's always what I heard. Every time I would go to a Dharma teaching, or I would, even in my own practice, it just seems to really not be the point of the practice. And I think what I started to realize is in not really vocalizing that, number one, I didn't think I was being authentic to myself. I would, do the 3 jewels and all these prayers and chants, and it felt very meaningless to me because it wasn't something that resonated to me. The idea of deities didn't resonate to me. I would always be that jerk in the back of the classroom that would ask about karma and wait a minute, what's this whole karma thing? What about in the here and now? What about heaven and hell right here on earth? Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And I just kind of started to notice in my own practice that I was becoming a little bit combative. And I think it's because I was struggling with my own kind of, what do I believe in? And then I think when I finally realized that, man, Sarah, you just don't believe in a God concept. What's the big deal? It was really like an albatross had been lifted. And I think, I just, I forgot your question. I went off on anyway.
Identification as a secular Buddhist.
Yeah, so that's kind of what happened there. And, and I also really do believe that if one person can say that in any situation, whether it be the workplace, school, their home, their place of practice or study, or their space of fellowship, if just one person can say that out loud, that makes it okay for other people who might be suffering, struggling, doubting in silence because they're afraid to say the words.
Yeah, it's very important that openness, because it's not just opening the door for you. You're also showing that there is a door that other people can pass through as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Sunday Assembly, I'm wondering what you might say to someone about this, why this might be of interest to them. Sarah, why don't you keep talking about that, and then we'll ask each other's.
Well, for fear of repeating anything here, I think that Sunday assembly, I think it's beneficial because it just cuts through what I see happening. What I see happening when I'm looking at their video footage and I'm looking at footage of what they're doing over there. And I see the vibrant, exciting, fun, vivacious, joyous kind of celebration. I mean, all their little quippy things the adjectives that they use to describe this organization seem to really fit what I'm seeing when I'm looking at this. I think that, speaking for myself, and I can only imagine that, there are a lot of people out there who I'm sure probably feel similarly about it, just looking for a place to go to not maybe take yourself so seriously with it all, but just an open space to kind of be with non-belief, to kind of cut through all the politicizing, the bashing, the ways of finding of separatism. I don't know if that's a word.
It is now.
Yeah, there is now. There we go. There it is. And just a place to cut through all of that, because I really think that our proclivity to looking for the things that separate us from others, or a proclivity to bash, is really an outcropping of almost like a national malaise of insecurity around what it means to be secular. I think if you're really comfortable in your non-belief, you don't have to do that. You don't feel the need to do that. And so I kind of feel like by celebrating it, by bringing everybody together and celebrating non-belief, the lack of a God concept, whatever you want to call it, humanism, secularism, atheism, whatever you want to call it, it makes it okay. And I think it's going to make it okay for people who come and visit. And I think that can be, for some people, could potentially be very life-changing if this is something that they've been grappling with and afraid to share with others. So,
Amy, how about you? What would you say to someone about why this might be of interest to them?
I think there is a hunger in people to gather with others who share their values. I think that takes different forms. I think sometimes we want to serve our communities. Sometimes we want to establish friendships. Sometimes we want to talk something out. And there are lots of places where we can do that. And I'm not saying that Sunday Assembly is necessary for everyone, but I think that gathering with people who share your values and just see what comes of it, and not attributing the goodness that we can do together to some outside supernatural force, which is a concept and a value that I have and that I would like to share. I think it's powerful. I do think to be relevant, we have to do something more. I think that we'll want to get together and sing, and I think that that'll be a lot of fun. But I think the thing that will keep people coming back together is that relevance, and that'll be service projects, that'll be friendships, that'll be our kids having playmates that keep coming back to this community.
And Ian, how about you? What you might say to someone about why this might be of interest to them?
Well, as I was sitting here listening to Sarah and Amy and scrambling to try and find something that didn't simply parrot what they were sharing with you, a thought just occurred to me. So here's a little side story. Last September, so not quite a year ago, my father passed away. He was 90 years old, and he had led just a really amazing life of science, and a marriage of 63 years, and a couple of kids who have, I guess my brother and I have ended up moderately successful by whatever measures we chose. And I have never shed a tear over the death of my father. And it's because, he felt like, and I feel like, we have this one precious life, and he really lived it just the way he wanted to. And so, in a weird kind of way, it didn't even really feel like a loss to me. And as I've reflected on that over the last not quite a year since he died, I've been thinking about this idea of community and how we can come together to celebrate this one precious life, and really, for those of us who don't hold on to the idea of a possible hereafter, it really makes living in the here now that much more precious. It really lends value to our everyday existence. And, I would love to leave this world and have people throw a great big party and never shed a tear for me when I'm gone. So I kind of see that's what we're trying to, that's kind of what we're trying to bring together here.
So tell us about the 40 Dates and 40 Nights Roadshow. Sarah, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, this to me is just epitomizes how fun. I'm looking forward to hopefully get to meet Sanderson and Pippa because they just sound like a lot of fun. But so they started this organization, as was mentioned earlier, in England, and it took off, and they thought, wow, this is really something. There was some interest in New York. They brought it to New York. It took off. And now they're getting ready to do another one in New York. And so this kind of, I'm assuming that they must have gotten to talking. I don't know, but they decided to create this 40 Dates and 40 Nights Roadshow. And the idea is that you can go to their website, and if you are a city somewhere that has a potential interest and you have an organization, maybe you have some people organizing with an interest to bring Sunday Assembly to that city, then you can follow the instructions that are pointed out on their website numerically. They're very clear instructions that they give you. And basically you're rallying together, and you're organizing to get votes to bring the 40 Dates and 40 Nights Roadshow to your town, which is exactly what we're doing with our band of Sunday Assembly LA. So basically, you have until September 15th to get your vote in, 14th actually, to get your vote in. They count the votes on the 15th, and whoever gets the most votes, those cities are going to get this big party this big secular party come rolling through their town. Mm-hmm. So this is basically what we're doing. We're trying to be one of those cities that's going to get to have this big party.
Awesome. Amy, could you tell us a little bit about the Eventbrite page, which, by the way, for folks listening, I will have this linked on the episode page for the episode. Tell us about that and how that ties to the 40 Dates and 40 Nights.
So the Eventbrite page is just a simple way to sign up because we don't have a date nailed down because we're waiting until we, win one of these spots on the tour. And because, our venue is somewhat dependent on the kind of interest we have, this is a nice, simple placeholder. So it's Eventbrite. And for those of you not looking at the website, it's brite.com. And you can search Sunday Assembly there. And it's just a quick sign-in process. And that way you make sure that you get all those updates as those details become available, like which special guests and what day and what venue. And you can find actually Sunday Assemblies in different towns on Eventbrite. But of course, ours is the one I recommend if you're in Los Angeles.
So is there a deadline for this? And also I wanted to ask, distinguish this a bit from the Facebook page too, if you would.
Yes. So Eventbrite is the direct link to distinguish it from Facebook. You can get news and updates from Facebook, and I'm fairly certain we have the Eventbrite link there.
At the very top of our Facebook event page.
At the very top, where it should be. The Eventbrite site is where you can sign up directly to attend Sunday Assembly. And what was the first part of your question? Deadline. So September 14th is one deadline. We were very interested in getting as many signups as possible by the 14th because that will help us win a spot on this tour. I'm going to keep using that word because everyone likes winning.
I'm sensing an attachment to winning.
You've read me so well. And then the other deadline, and the other reason that signing up by September 14th or signing up early rather than later, even if you're not sure you can go, is helpful, is because we are making decisions about venues, and we can make sure to keep in touch with everyone and plan accordingly. But our actual Sunday Assembly date is to be determined, and that will likely be in the fall. It will likely be in November. So we will continue to accept signups through that site through November.
Got it. So the important message here is you have a deadline of mid-September, mm-hmm. and go to Facebook certainly for the updates, but don't post, sign me up. You got to go to the Eventbrite page, and again, I'll have that linked on the episode page for this episode, but just to make sure that you hear what it is, it's sundayassemblyla.eventbrite, sundayassembly.com. That's one you need to go to. And I also wanted to ask, Sarah, maybe you'd talk for a moment about, are there other Sunday assemblies, and how can people find out more about that?
Well, actually, Sunday Assembly has a website, thesundayassembly.com, and you can find out quite a bit of information on their website in terms of where they are. And another interesting thing of note on their website is to take a look at some of the themes. So what they do is they actually tackle a theme with each meeting, and we're still kind of talking about which theme we would like to discuss for the first one. I think everybody's still kind of debating on that one, but it's kind of interesting to check out their site and see what themes they've covered so far. It's some pretty interesting stuff, and you can learn quite a bit there on their website about where all they are. To be perfectly honest, I don't know exactly where all they are.
Well, let me jump in there real quick. Actually, we've had a really nice bit of support from Hemant Mehta at the Friendly Atheist blog, and he's got a list of various cities where Sunday Assembly is already up and running, or at least in the process of organizing. And so I'm just looking at it right now. I know that they are up and running in Brighton and Bristol and Edinburgh, Scotland, Melbourne, Australia, Brisbane. But here in the United States, we're looking at Buffalo, New York City, obviously, which is already up and running. Chicago is in the process of being organized, and Hemant is working on that one himself. Here in Los Angeles as well. Marietta, Georgia, Phoenix, Arizona, Seattle, Washington, and the Silicon Valley and Vancouver, British Columbia are all in process.
Just a couple neighborhoods.
Wow.
Just a couple few.
Yeah.
That's great. Tell us a little bit about who some of the guests might be that one might see at Sunday Assembly. What kinds of things might you see there?
I'm really excited about the possibilities that we have for entertainment, because being in Los Angeles, there's just a lot here, and we can't, unfortunately, give too many specifics yet because we're still in talks, but this is the sort of thing that I think once it takes off, the sky's really the limit. So there's a group called Hunter and the Dirty Jacks that is a personal favorite of mine. It's a local rock band that is specifically humanist focused, but does a lot of rock, and they're just great. And I think that the possibilities are endless, and I think music is a huge part of that. But another component that I'm really excited about is the non-musical component, and I think Ian can tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah, we've started to kick around some ideas about speakers. One person that we've talked to and said he'd love to come is Phil Zuckerman, who's actually a sociologist at Pitzer College here in Southern California, and he specializes in studying secular communities. But I approached him to say, hey, rather than just being the austere and detached academic sitting in the back of the pews observing all of this, gosh, would you be willing to get up front and tell stories about the secular people that you've met and the communities that they've built? And he said, yeah, I'd love to. I've got great stories. And he's this sort of wonderful little cherubic gentleman with this huge smile, and he just draws people in. So we've talked to Phil, and of course we live just down the road from places like Caltech, when we have access to literally rocket scientists and theoretical physicists and science writers and people in the entertainment industry. And so through the team that we have formed, that is Sunday Assembly LA, we have contact with just an incredible variety of inspiring speakers and entertainers. And so it's not going to be the stodgy old white guy heady lecture thing.
Yeah, like including magicians and actors, some big TV personalities.
Comedians.
Yeah, there's just a lot. There's a lot that I'm looking forward to.
Was there anything else we'd like to talk about before we break and close this episode?
I can't think of anything that is really pressing, other than to encourage people to check it out. Come join our Eventbrite page. Hopefully in the next few days we'll have a little promo video up on YouTube that we were just working on this morning that will give people more of an idea of what kind of fun we have in mind.
And we have a Twitter account, so share it. If you don't just vote, you share it, send it, get it out there, post it on your spread it around.
And if you're unsure, if someone's listening who thinks that they might want to go but they're not positive or they're hesitating on the date, there's no harm in signing up to the site. No one's going to come knocking on anyone's door. We just want to make sure that everyone who's interested does get the necessary details, especially since at this point there are a lot of things that are still in flux.
And actually,
I'll be embedding the video for the Sunday Assembly and the episode page as well. So I'd like to thank our guest today, Amy Boyle. Amy, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sarah, I hope you'll come back to this podcast to talk about the documentary you're working on.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Ian, thank you. I finally got you on the podcast. It only took 3 years.
I've only been in and out of Minnesota for the last 3 years now, but it looks like I'll be coming in and out of there for the next several years.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the SBA website at secularbuddhism.org, and you'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. Discussion about this episode can be found on the episode page itself, along with show notes. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizen Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are also linked on the SBA site on the About Podcast Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.